Here I am again with another set of stories, so please consider subscribing to keep me motivated for creating content and bringing it to you for your entertainment. And while you're at it, click the notification as well. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Story 1, ordered to do maintenance on a grill without the right equipment. Grill was broken trying anyways. TLDR, I got told to do a job I couldn't do or get written up. I refused. Someone dumber got roped into doing it. Stuff broke. I got told to help fix it. I said I already accepted being written up for opting out of this experience, and took the write-up. Another fun story about my favorite supervisor from when I was in the Navy. A little bit of backstory to help explain some of the later facts. In the military, every piece of equipment gets preventative maintenance done on it to maintain it in good, working condition. In the Navy, we have a very well laid out maintenance system with step-by-step instructions on how to do every bit of maintenance, with instructions so simple a monkey could do it. Part of these maintenance procedures lists required tools, parts, materials, and test equipment, and they are also extremely specific, detailing the length requirement of your screwdrivers, the brand of your gauges, etc. The management of this system the Navy uses is called the Maintenance Material Management System. 3M, or Planned Maintenance System, PMS. As an electrician, we owned all electrical distribution equipment on board, and for jobs without an electrical training background, we also owned the actual equipment. So, the electronics technicians, with electrical training, could maintain their own electrical equipment. But the cooks, culinary specialists, without an electrical background, relied on us to maintain their equipment for them. Now, if you've ever used a commercial flat-top grill/griddle before, you know you set it to a specific temperature you want the cooktop heated to, and not a 0 to 9 dial like your stove at home. Part of maintaining the griddle was checking the calibration of this temperature setting once every year or two. I forget how often this check was, but it wasn't a frequent check. Relatively early on when I got on board the ship, young EMFN, junior electrician, Gwen BD 94 was assigned to do this maintenance check, so I gathered all of my tools, parts, materials etc. In doing so I couldn't find the proper temperature sensor for our calibrated temperature gauge. We had the round-tip ambient temperature probe for use in the ovens, but not the flat-tip surface temperature probe for use on a griddle. I asked a different supervisor to my favorite supervisor for help, and he couldn't find it either, so we ordered a new one, and he said he'd take care of the paperwork for the maintenance check. Being new and unfamiliar with the system, I let it go and never questioned when the maintenance check disappeared from the maintenance list the next week, meaning someone accomplished it, hint nudge nudge, and all was good. The next time this maintenance check came up due, we were on deployment, and it was again assigned to me. By this time, we had a new supervisor. And I was now EM3, slightly less junior electrician, Gwen BD 94. A bit more knowledgeable. I looked where we kept all our calibrated equipment and couldn't find the flat-top temperature probe I knew it needed, so I asked my supervisor. He found we had one on order but didn't know that we had one in the shop, and told me to figure it out. Knowing that was an unlawful order and would amount to lying about the check and could bite me in the ass later, I said I wouldn't do the maintenance without the right equipment, and since he couldn't lawfully order me to, we started putting a note on the check that the tools were on order, and delaying it. This went on for about 2 to 3 months until the check was about to go red, move out of periodicity and cause negative numbers on out maintenance reports, and I was again ordered to figure it out or I'd be written up. I refused, and raised the same issue to my boss's boss, and we tore the shop apart trying to find the right equipment but couldn't find it, so he told me not to worry about it. Later that week, while I was on watch as a roving watchstander, allowed to walk around the ship, and even required to, after dinner one evening I saw a newer, more junior electrician, let's call him EMFA Timmy, even more junior than I initially was electrician, in the galley kitchen, working on the griddle. I took a step into the galley and asked him what he was doing, and lo and behold, he was doing the maintenance check. I asked him what temperature probe he was using and he showed me the one for the oven. I explained to him the issue and told him if he signed the maintenance check it would be gun decking, lying on official paperwork, and he could get in trouble, but let him make his own decisions as an adult. He decided to continue doing the check. I giggled and continued on with my watch. After my watch, it was nearly 10 p.m. so I went to bed for the night. About an hour later I got woken up, being told my supervisor needed me in the galley. I signed, figuring it was about the check, and I was going to get that earlier threatened write-up. After getting dressed and making it to the galley, the entire electrical shop was in the galley troubleshooting the griddle. You see, EMFA Timmy got to the step in the PMS where it said to use a screwdriver to adjust a dial until the thermometer read the same temperature indicated by the set temperature. When he measured it, it was off by about 150 degrees, so he kept turning up the heat. Eventually, it was hot enough to melt the griddle's built-in overtemp protection device, instantly shutting the stovetop off. Turns out, he did need that temperature probe. I was tasked with helping come up with a solution to fix it, because the griddle was a critical piece of equipment for the cooks, and we had no replacement parts to fix it. I asked EMFA Timmy if he ever finished the last steps of the maintenance card, turning the grill off, putting it back together, reporting completion of the PMS. He told me he hadn't. I turned to my boss and said since the maintenance check I explicitly advised against doing without the proper tools was still ongoing, and I was informed I could do the maintenance or be written up, I'd stick with my original decision and refuse to do the maintenance. He could write me up in the morning during working hours, but in the meantime, I was going back to bed. Have a nice night. In the morning, I did indeed get written up, but for the insubordination, not for refusing the maintenance check, while my boss looked on with the biggest shit-eating grin at me for holding my ground, and my supervisor was pissed at me. Turns out, I was right and we couldn't do that maintenance check without the right equipment. This remains one of my write-ups I am least ashamed to have ever gotten, and I'd take it again in a heartbeat to give a giant, "I told you so," middle finger to idiot middle managers. I later found an electronic record of the counseling chit my supervisor got for tasks people with doing maintenance without the proper equipment, because I laid out that this was a known issue we didn't have the right probe for years and threw his ass deep under the bus. Hated the guy. We got the right probe in about 6 months later. Kindly subscribe the channel and support me to keep me motivated for creating content and bringing it to you for your entertainment. Story 2, Want It Done By. The book? Fine, I'll follow every rule. So, I work at a company that prides itself on having a detailed, overly complicated policy manual for everything. We've got rules for rules, basically. My manager, let's call him Dave, is the kind of guy who loves micromanaging. He'd constantly hover over our shoulders, pointing out every tiny mistake we made, saying, "If it's in the manual, you must follow it." One day, Dave sent me an urgent email asking me to finish a big project before the end of the day. Normally, I'd do it my usual way, efficiently and with a bit of common sense. But Dave insisted that I strictly adhere to the manual since it was a high-visibility project and he didn't want any mistakes. Oh, Dave. You shouldn't have said that. I pulled out the manual and went full compliance mode. 1. Every procedure, no matter how small, was followed to the letter. Normally, I'd skip pointless steps, like writing a detailed log for every 10-minute task. Not this time. I logged everything. Starting a document? Log it. Saving the file? Log it again. Changing font size? Yep, logged. 2. Requests for approvals? Oh, absolutely. The manual says certain steps need managerial sign-off, so I emailed Dave at least 5 times throughout the day for approvals. Hey, Dave, just confirming font size 12 is acceptable? Please reply so I can continue. Hi, Dave, should I use blue headers or red headers as per policy section 14.3.2? 3. Breaks were strictly enforced. Policy states we get 2 15-minute breaks and a 1-hour lunch. Normally, I'd work through a bit of lunch to get things done, but not today. At 12 o'clock sharp, I dropped everything and left my desk. I also spent 15 minutes at exactly 10 o'clock and 3 o'clock resting. For, every department had to be involved. The manual said I needed sign-offs from IT, HR, and marketing for certain sections, even though they had nothing to do with the project. I looped them in with formal requests, dragging out the timeline. By the end of the day, the project wasn't finished. I spent so much time complying with the manual that I didn't even get halfway through. Dave was furious and asked why it wasn't done. I calmly explained that I followed every single policy and procedure in the manual, just like he instructed. I even showed him the email chain proving he'd approved my steps. After that, Dave stopped breathing down my neck and started letting me work how I wanted. Lesson learned: sometimes, the best way to fix a broken system is to show exactly how broken it is. Kindly subscribe the channel and support me to keep me motivated for creating content and bringing it to you for your entertainment. Story 3. Got reprimanded for not leaving my uniforms at work, so now I didn't have any uniforms at home. When it mattered, TLDR, military situation where I didn't have the right uniform available, got written up for not having it, made sure all uniforms were on board and available in future. But later needed a uniform at home and didn't have one due to earlier write-up. A couple of years ago I was in the Navy, and assigned duties on board a ship. At the start of the story, I was an extremely junior service member, lowest rank in my shop. Typically, on board the ship our usual uniform was coveralls, in our department, and we arrived and left from the ship when in homeport in civilian clothes. Now, we were moving up the river, about 4 hours underway, about an hour driving distance, for a week to unload weapon stores for a training exercise underway coming up later that month. Typically, when leaving the area of the port of record, which we would, for the training exercise, we're also required to have suitable transit uniforms aboard in case we pull into port elsewhere. For this week-long weapons unload, I had no plans to leave the ship, and we weren't leaving our port of record's geographical area, and would be returning to our home berth again before the upcoming trip, so I didn't prep my uniforms to bring on board, seeing no use for them. At the last minute, our medical department scheduled medical appointments on our behalf at a small satellite clinic at the weapons station, with no input of our own, and informed me I'd have a dental appointment while there. I immediately went to my supervisor with the issue, because I had no suitable uniforms for off-ship use on board, and we were required to attend medical appointments in uniform. I get written up for not having my uniforms. Now, there is no specific policies on which types or how many uniforms are required to be on board, but there are specific policies on having sea bag inspections, and what is required to be present for them, so my write-up was for not having an inspection-ready sea bag available. Copy that, makes sense. When we get home that weekend, I move all my military uniforms aboard, bringing a full inspection-ready sea bag to the ship as required, and leaving no uniforms at home. Everything's peachy. Fast forward a few years, and I have commanding officer's approval to miss an upcoming late-minute rescheduled underway due to prior scheduled leave in order to re-enlist. While I'm halfway across the country re-enlisting, my department fails an important inspection for our deployment workups. The inspectors work with the ship's command to reschedule, and they adjust the underway schedule last minute again. Now they're getting underway for a re-inspect the night before my leave ends, and the re-inspection starts the day I return from leave. The inspectors will be ferried to the ship the morning of by water taxi. They asked me to curtail my leave a day early, buy new tickets, and show up, to help with this re-inspect. I informed them that I would prefer not to dole out thousands of dollars of my own money for last-minute changes to travel arrangements because of their failure, but understand if ordered I can financially do so, since my leave was approved by the CO to miss an underway. I'd like verbiage from the CO that my leave has been rescinded, recalling me. And if I receive such, it'll make me question my dedication to re-enlisting in a Navy that doesn't care about my financial well-being, meaning I'll leave the 6 months earlier than they expected, when I get out of the Navy instead of re-enlist, and won't return with signed re-enlistment papers. They balked, of course, and had me report the day my leave was originally planned to end. They decided I'd catch a ride with the water taxi, and all the senior officer inspectors, for the hour trip to meet the ship. Sounded interesting, the stinger? I asked them what I should wear for the water taxi ride, as all my uniforms were on the ship. They freaked out and asked why all my uniforms were on the ship, naturally. I explained I was ordered to do so by my supervisor and received a counseling chit for not having left all my uniforms on the ship previously. My options? Some recently cleaned coveralls. I'd take them home for laundry, ensuring I kept 2 pairs on the ship as required for sea bag rules, from before my leave, or my civilian clothes. Why? Because that's what I was told to do the last time a shipboard uniform use issue came up. Oh yeah, there I was, a junior E5, in civilian clothes, on board a chartered water taxi with a bunch of 04/05/06s in their uniforms, at 5 in the morning, on the way to redo a previously failed inspection. Kindly subscribe the channel and support me to keep me motivated for creating content and bringing it to you for your entertainment. Story 4. Charge truck battery at point B. 'Cause it's cheaper. This isn't my story, but a friend's, who's a truck driver, recently the contractor company said. Friend's boss works with got an electric truck. This is a big company, they already got a few of them, but at a different location, where charging is far easier due to many stations around. 'Cause it seems to go well, yeah, seems. 'Cause next year the electric trucks won't be exempt from paying tolls, and mind you, an electric truck costs twice as much as a full option Scania. They thought it'd be a great idea and good promo to get another e-truck at the location my friend works at. Only before ordering nobody checked on charging stations or even the distances and roads this guy drives, only that his hometown is practical for their endeavor. Now comes the good part, turns out we ain't got many stations that can charge a truck. I am no electrician by any means, but I'd still consider myself technically apt, so I went through the hassle to talk to this company, tried explaining that charging a battery is like filling a barrel. Only that you attach the hose to the bottom, so you need a certain amount X of base pressure to get that shit flowing, and because most charging stations only pack 75 to 150 kilowatts, that's a no-go for a truck. The only 300 kilowatt station in the area is located in the next city, not too far, but traffic sucks. Imagine driving an hour to make a 10 distance. But management had other problems entirely. Turns out their problem was that the 300 kilowatt station charges, to know the exact value, methinks like 80 CT/kW, the 150 kilowatt station, however, costs only 65 CT/kW, so they demanded he charge the truck where it's cheaper. And here it gets even better. This here is the reason why I tried reasoning with them, to no avail of course. Not every charging station is built to accommodate a truck, not even the ones that pack 300 kilowatts. Which means my man here has to first find an empty space to leave his trailer. Once you're done with that, you still got to find an empty lot to park and charge. And once you're there, there's still the possibility of someone parking next to you and grabbing the second charging cable of the station, which then halves the performance to 75 kilowatts. Just for reference, even charging at a 300 kilowatt station takes 2H, so, after our arguments hit a brick wall, he gave in. You want me to waste valuable time on a piss-poor charger, just cause it's a little bit cheaper? Fine. Next day he proceeds to charging. After 2 or 3 hours the office gets the jitters, cause work keeps piling up and they can't always manage to bring the freight in time, so they call him, "Aren't you done charging yet?" "Nope, not even close, buddy." "When TF are you planning on returning? We need you at work." You know, a truck only brings in money when it's rolling, not parking. I am not the one that came up with the idea to charge a fucking truck at a 150 kW station. You sent me here. I tried explaining it you, but you wouldn't listen. And unless you want me to come over just to look for the next charging station, you'll have to wait. How long? Welp, I just hit the 17% mark, so I'ma be here for a while. He was camped out there the whole day, didn't get shit done, and at the end the battery still wasn't fully charged. They never bothered him again. Kindly subscribe the channel and support me to keep me motivated for creating content and bringing it to you for your entertainment. Story 5, I have to drive this truck? Okay, so, back in the day I was a truck driver. The company had a few trucks that were made for different jobs. Depending on the job you had to deliver determined the truck you drove. So, it was not too uncommon to drive 3 different trucks in one day. The company was piss poor on maintenance of the vehicles. Over the years with them I received a few fines for things like no inspection and stuff like that. Even though I received the fine, the company would pay the fine. No harm, no foul. Finally, our big truck really started to go downhill. It got to the point where it was barely running and needed a ton of repairs costing thousands to fix. I told the company I refused to drive the truck as it was an accident waiting to happen. Well, this lasted a week and then they said that I needed to drive the truck for one delivery. Unfortunately, I agreed out of a need to be a team player and service my customer. The drive was horrible. It was leaving a trail of smoke 10 feet high as I drove down the highway. I knew I was in trouble when they loaded a case of motor oil in the cab for me to fill the engine if needed. On the way there the cars behind me were turning on their high beams to see because of the smoke trail I was leaving. Then as the sun finally came up, people were pulling up next to me on the highway, honking, and giving me the finger. I found out so much liquid oil was coming out the exhaust that oil was landing on the vehicles behind me. It was only a 50-mile round trip and the truck lost 24 quarts of oil and almost a tank of fuel. So, I told them I would not drive the truck till it's fixed. As a truck driver you are required to do a pre-trip inspection of the vehicle prior to driving every day. You mark down the defects and there is room for notes in the logbook. 1 copy stays in the truck and 1 copy goes to the company. There's a 3rd copy that goes to DOT if requested. I made sure to fill this out fully every time I drove this truck. I also made a separate list, mostly as a note for myself covering things that I thought was important but not necessarily a part of the pre-trip inspection. The next day I came in and found the truck fully loaded. I told them I was not driving the truck. They said, well, you have to. After a quick thought I said okay, malicious compliance. I pulled out of the lot. At the traffic light I'd make a left to head to the job, however I was out of fuel, so I had to turn right to get to the gas station to fuel up. Then backtrack to head to the job. And yes, I meant gas. It was a 33 kLb truck with a gas engine. Well, DOT was set up on the other side of the road just before the gas station. They watched as I drove by, wishing they could get me. In case you don't know, DOT stands for the Department of Transportation. For big trucks, they run the weigh stations on the highway. But in heavy truck areas they set up a mobile station and inspect trucks randomly. They verify paperwork is in order and the vehicle and driver are safe. Any fines here are expensive. Plus, they can put a truck out of service, meaning it cannot be driven till repaired. At that point it must be towed and fixed. Then I pull in the fuel station. As I'm filling, I can feel them watching me, so I leave the fuel station and head back towards DOT. They run out into the street to make me pull in. They wanted this truck. I pull in and shut down the truck. The DOT cop walks up to the truck with a creeper. I say, why do you need that? He says, what? I say, the creeper. He says, I got to check your truck. I say, nah, I got to list. I hand him my notes and log book. He says, Then he goes back to his car and I can see him furiously writing. After about 30 minutes he comes back. He says to me, why are you driving this truck? I tell him they told me I had to. There's no other truck? He asks. Nope, I reply. What happens if you don't drive this? He asks. I say, I guess I sit home. He says, I'll be right back. After about another 20 minutes he comes back to me. He slaps a big red, out of service, tag on the windshield. Then he tells me, there are 21 issues that are putting the truck out of service. Plus I am giving the company a fine for letting you drive this truck. Unfortunately, your fuel tax sticker is expired. If I write you up for this, it is a $10,000 fine to you. But I called on the local cops, it will be a $90 fine for you that the company should pay. I thank him and he leaves. I call the company and get a ride back to the warehouse. Bottom line, they paid all fines, which were north of $65,000 including towing. The next week we had a fleet of new leased trucks with a maintenance plan with replacement trucks, if ours were down for issues. And they came out and washed the trucks twice a month. I worked there another 2 years and quit because of other truck issues. A competitor poached me with better money. But this goes to show. I am not risking my life and the public's life for your job. In the end you paid for a $65,000 lesson. When I say I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it unless it's safe, then I pull in the fuel station. As I'm filling, I can feel them watching me. Kindly subscribe the channel and support me to keep me motivated for creating content and bringing it to you for your entertainment. Story 6, treat the fire drill as if was real. My great-uncle passed away at 97 and I heard this great story of malicious compliance at his memorial service today. He worked for over 50 years at the same confectionery factory, and for most of that time he was a boiler room attendant. This was just after WW2, and at the time most of the machines and processes were powered by steam, even the heating. The steam was generated by massive boilers and it was his job to monitor the boilers to make sure nothing went wrong. These boilers could potentially explode, causing great damage. By law the boiler had to be attended at all times and there were shifts that watched them around the clock, even when the factory was closed. They took so long to heat up that it was easier and cheaper to leave them running at night. After about 10 years of no incidents, the company hired a leading hand who would also act as the safety officer. He had been a sergeant in the army and he took his job quite seriously, being quite the disciplinarian. He instituted a multitude of new procedures, some warranted, some just to establish control. The first time he wanted to conduct a fire drill, he went around telling the staff that when they heard the alarm, they had to exit the building in an orderly fashion. He got to the boiler room and it was my great-uncle on duty that day. He informed him he would not be able to evacuate with everyone else and had to stay with the boiler. The safety officer didn't give him time to explain why. He just bluntly informed him that he was to treat the fire drill as if it was a real fire, no exceptions. When the fire bell finally rang, my uncle did exactly what he was told to do. He turned off the gas to the boilers, vented all the built-up steam, purged the water and joined everyone outside. At the evacuation point they were doing a head count when the production manager spotted my uncle and immediately approached him and asked what he was doing away from the boiler. He said he was participating in the fire drill as instructed, but not to worry as he had shut the boiler down completely. The color immediately drained from the manager's face. He was asked how long it would take to bring the boilers back online. Apparently, it would take hours alone just to fill the boilers with water and heat them up. The big issue was that because they had done an emergency purge, they were required to inspect every pipe, joint and connection for damage before to make sure it was safe to start to reheat. The other boiler men were called in and they got paid double time to work through the night to get the boiler ready for the next day. Production staff all got sent home but still got paid for the day as it wasn't their fault the factory couldn't run. It cost them a day's production as well. Safety officer did keep his job, but for the next 40 years the boiler staff were all exempt from fire drills. Kindly subscribe the channel and support me to keep me motivated for creating content and bringing it to you for your entertainment. Story 7, you want it fast? Fine, but don't cry when it blows up in your face. I work at a big retail chain, where the stockroom is the Wild West and chaos is the norm. We recently got a new supervisor, Sarah, who seems to think she's running the Navy SEALs or something. She's obsessed with speed, constantly on us about how we need to get things done faster. Doesn't matter if it's done right, as long as it's done fast. So, one day, during peak restock time when we're drowning in boxes, Sarah storms in with her clipboard and her best "I'm in charge" face. She corners me while I'm halfway through a massive inventory check and says, "You're taking way too long with these. Just get through them quickly. We don't have time to check every single item." I try to explain that rushing inventory checks is a bad idea, but she cuts me off with a condescending smile. "If you can't speed this up, maybe this job isn't the right fit for you," she says, all smug like she just dropped a bombshell. "Alright, Sarah. You want speed? Let's see how fast things can spiral out of control." So, I take her words to heart and decide to follow her instructions exactly. The next day, I'm scheduled for another inventory check. Instead of my usual process where I count everything carefully, I decide to play Sarah's game. I glance at the shelves and make up numbers that seem about right. I don't even bother opening boxes to check if what's inside matches the labels. I fly through the whole process, marking items off like I'm speedrunning a video game. What usually takes me 2 hours, I finish in just 20 minutes. Sarah sees me finish up, and I can see her eyes light up. She walks over, grinning ear to ear. "See, that wasn't so hard, was it? If you keep this up, you might even get a little bonus this month," she says, patting herself on the back for her brilliant leadership skills. Fast forward a week, and the store manager, Mike, calls an emergency meeting. The inventory reports have come back, and they're a total disaster. According to the report, we're missing thousands of dollars worth of products. It looks like we either lost half the stock or we're running some underground black market. Mike's pissed, customers are complaining about out-of-stock items, and the regional manager is breathing down his neck. Mike turns to Sarah and asks her to explain how this could have happened. Sarah, trying to save face, immediately points at the team and says, "They must have messed up the counts. They weren't thorough enough." She's throwing us under the bus without a second thought. This is where I decide to strike. I raise my hand and say, "Actually, I did exactly what Sarah told us to do. She said to skip checking the items and just get it done as quickly as possible. I was just following orders." You could hear a pin drop. Mike slowly turns to Sarah, his expression going from confused to furious. "Is this true?" he asks, narrowing his eyes at her. Sarah's stammering now, trying to backtrack. "Well, I didn't mean to skip it entirely. I just meant to speed it up. But it's too late. The damage is done." Mike's already fuming. "So, you decided to cut corners on the one thing that affects our bottom line? You do realize we have to do a full recount now because of this mess, right?" And that's exactly what happens. The next day, Sarah and a few unlucky team members spend 12 hours redoing the entire inventory check from scratch. The rest of us get to enjoy watching them sweat it out while we handle our regular duties. It's glorious. As they're counting, I make sure to walk by every so often and ask, "Need any help speeding things up? I could skip a few checks for you if that helps." The look on Sarah's face every time is pure rage mixed with embarrassment. She can't say anything because she knows I'm just doing what she asked for. By the end of it, we've found thousands of dollars in discrepancies. Turns out, rushing through inventory checks leaves a lot of room for errors. Who knew? Faced with rolling eyes, the regional manager isn't happy and Sarah ends up getting a formal warning. She stops harping on us about speed after that and even tries to be extra nice whenever I'm around. Guess she realized that maybe, just maybe, some tasks shouldn't be rushed. The best part? A couple of weeks later, I get a small bonus for outstanding attention to detail in helping fix the inventory mess. Oh, the irony. Sarah couldn't even look me in the eye when I got the bonus slip. And every time she walks by me now, I just give her a friendly smile and say, "Don't worry, boss, I'm working as fast as you want." Thank you for tuning in. Kindly subscribe the channel and support me to keep me motivated for creating content and bringing it to you for your entertainment. And while you're at it, click the notification as well. This is all for now. See you again in the next video.